To quote you here in the 2025 classical teacher, you say, students should not be taught that the world revolves around them. They need to be taught that there is a philosophical, moral, and aesthetic reality to which they must conform, and that their happiness depends upon their success in doing this. I'm going to piggyback off Dorothy Sayers here for the Lost Tools of Learning. She says, it is not the great defect of our education today that although we often succeed in teaching our pupils subjects, we fail lamentably on the whole in teaching them how to think. They learn everything except the art of learning. Mm-hmm. So to kind of build upon that then, how does classical education then teach our children how to teach themselves? And I believe you were giving a keynote online, maybe during the government shutdown days, where you talk about your own three sons who got careers in fields that they didn't have, but because of classical education, they were able to almost teach themselves. And I just remember myself in college looking around going, oh no, now I must figure out how I must learn because they weren't at that time, many years ago. I can say that now, I'm that old, that they weren't spoon feeding us. But I had to figure out how best I learned. So how does then classical teaching help even our young children to middle school, high school, and into the career elements?
Well, I think number one, just the first answer is just the arts and the sciences, right? It's mental development, moral, intellectual, and aesthetic. But I think that one of the problems we had, because you mentioned my boys, I was talking, I think they're about how we think again that education is simply to get a job. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day. No, no. Now there is vocational training that you can get later on in your education, but you shouldn't be doing it you need to get a broad general education. For one thing, you have no idea in many cases what kind of job you're going to have after graduating from college. You will be better fitted for any job by having a general education. For one, I was a humanities major. I didn't like math. I got to calculus A, apparently loved the course because I took it 3 times. But that is those old general ed requirements that we used to have at the University of California where I went, that was good. The idea was good because I didn't know what I was going to be. I graduated from college. I still didn't know what I was going to do. I just sort of closed my eyes and took the phone book and, the yellow pages, banking, so I did that for 8 years. But I got a general education. I was well educated broadly. I could start in anything I wanted to, right? And my boys, my oldest son, as you probably heard in that presentation, was a philosophy major. And then he went to law school. And then 4 years into law, which he hated, he just shut down his law practice and started a software development company because he learned coding himself. And now he's a principal, which is apparently above senior, software developer for a top 50 company. My second son is as well. They can do that because they know how to think, right? They took hard courses. They took Latin. They took logic. If you look at coding, it's linguistic / logical.
Right.
I asked my oldest son, and he's like a closure guru, which is one of these elite programming languages, write academic articles on it. And he said, well, because I said, was modern logic really good for preparation for coding? And that's different from the logic I teach. My logic is linguistic logic that you actually use. But that modern logic has those symbols and everything, and that looks a lot to me like code. But he said, actually, the Latin helped me more because coding computer languages don't just have, it's just not some symbolic word. They have syntax and they have a grammar to them. The more advanced they are, the more of that they have. So actually, the Latin was a lot more useful to me when I started coding than any even coding classes that he took, which were very few. He never took any in college.
I think too. My initial start was engineering, and once I got out of engineering into criminal justice, my ability to do mental math fell out of my head, and sadly
Yes.
I have to pick it up again. But watching my kids know nothing about a calculator, know nothing about the phone that's in my pocket that
Hmm.
we all decried our teachers at
Hmm.
some point in time. And our teachers were smart at least at that point, saying you won't always have a calculator in your pocket. What they should have said was you don't need a calculator in your pocket if you do that. It's nice to see that it's that brain development. It's that muscle.
Hmm.
How do you gain muscle? Well, by picking up heavy things and doing it a
Hmm.
lot until
Hmm.
it hurts, and then you figure out when it doesn't hurt, and then you do more. So
Well, and it's kind of surprising to me to think of all the times I have kind of resorted to certain mathematical concepts, in calculus, limits for some. I was talking the other day about limits in calculus, how something approaches something but never quite gets to it. That actually is a good analogy for some things outside of calculus. Um, I took financial math. I mean, if I had to, I could go and figure out how to give me a day or two, but I could calculate present value. I could calculate future value if I had to do it. And that's developing another part of your mind, which you think has nothing to do with something in the humanities, but actually there's analogies everywhere, analogies to other things, which is really how you think. I was telling my son the other day, I said, I need to remember that the best way to argue, after all the logic books I've written, the best way to argue is by analogy, by saying, well, that's like, you want to refute somebody? That's like saying thus and such,
yeah,
which is preposterous on its face. And yet what you just said is almost an imitation of that on another subject, and things like that. So I just really think that we have really done children a disservice by specializing in things because
yeah.
it's just as likely they're not going to do those things. They're going to do something else. And if you haven't given them a general education, then they won't be suited for those things, right?
And that interconnectivity with everything else from the math of how to feed an army
Hmm.
during
Hmm.
history.
Hmm.
Uh, I will admit, if you ask my children, what do we never do in winter? And it's attack the Russians.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, right.
I find nerdy ways in order to incorporate family sayings at some point. So hopefully we'll learn from history that way.
Right.
But their mother takes them just on shopping trips, and we learn good virtue by being nice and saying please and thank yous. But
Hmm.
now we're having to do our 12s because everything at Costco's in bulk, and so we're getting into the upper numbers for it. So I just love seeing that classical model of just how else can we use this? Where else do we see numbers in history or history in numbers? And
Hmm.
the fact that when we talk about zero, how late in the game zero developed, and
Hmm.
the Egyptians and the Romans, it took them so long to even think about the concept of that.
Hmm.
So it's just amazing to talk about that connectivity that we're able to build in.